Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to explain how Boris Johnson is faced with another highly political charged Brexit consequence affecting trade between Britain and Northern Ireland that he has chosen to deal with in the short term by pretending that he has a plan to calm the Brexiteers down. However, it will come as no surprise, I imagine, to most people to learn that this cunning plan has no basis in reality. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news in politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So, Brexit trade is basically knackered. As I was discussing yesterday, there are two aspects of it. The first is the temporary aspect of not actually having the systems in place in order to cope with the massive trade barriers that we have chosen to throw up between ourselves and our largest trading partners. Two, the permanent impact of those same trade barriers that can never be removed, even with the best systems. You know, like having to fill in a silly amount of paperwork, carrying out checks on certain goods, to say nothing of the extra costs that simply make some trades uneconomical. And as is generally the case with Brexit, the impacts are going to be most keenly felt in Northern Ireland, and indeed have been, due to their rather novel needs. Now, the Good Friday Agreement was formulated on the notion that the UK and Ireland shared a customs union, free movement area, and it all sort of worked based on that. Now, as soon as this was no longer going to be the case, we were going to need a customs border at least. Put it inside Ireland and you breach the Good Friday Agreement. Put it between Northern Ireland and Britain, which is where it is, and you piss off the right-wing nutters in the DUP and the Conservative Party. Either way, you raise trade barriers that hurt businesses in both Northern Ireland and Britain. Now, by choosing to place that border between Britain and Northern Ireland, Boris Johnson bowed to international law but pissed off people in his own support base. Now, he got around this by denying that the customs border would have any impact. There was the famous video of him saying, if anyone tries to send you a form to fill in, you just send it to me and I'll throw it in the bin. To this effect, Boris Johnson pretended to try and breach the withdrawal agreement a few months ago and abolish the Irish Sea customs border. The DUP were happy, the international community were not, including the incoming President-elect of the United States. Now, Boris Johnson, of course, later on, folded and then reaffirmed his commitment to the customs border between Britain and Northern Ireland, which is now in place. Now that Brexit is reality, and we've seen the impact of this huge amount of friction with trade between Britain and Northern Ireland, to say nowhere else, jingoistic Brexiteers in the Conservative Party who pushed for this, their fault, are now complaining. This is literally like the Kent Brexiteers complaining about the lorry parks. And what these guys are complaining to Boris Johnson about is, you need to do something because we can't have all this friction in trade. We can't have all this chaos. You know, Boris Johnson promised that there wouldn't be checks, that there wouldn't be paperwork. They want to see him deliver on that now. Boris Johnson's response? Oh, there's this Article 16 thing, I'll just use that. You know, Article 16 of the Northern Ireland Protocol. And just like that, these Brexiteers have calmed down again, it seems. Oh, okay, that's fine, that's okay. So first of all, briefly, what is Article 16? Why it doesn't solve the problem, why Brexiteers are fairly dim for thinking it could, and how Brexiteers in general, who keep believing Boris Johnson, I'm not talking about all Brexiteers, but the ones who just keep believing Boris Johnson, are the dumbest of all morons. Because first of all, Article 16, the Northern Ireland Protocol, exists as the Northern Ireland Protocol in general is a series of sticking plasters, really, effectively, to keep the Good Friday Agreement in place. You know, like I said, the agreement was built on a foundation of free trade and movement between Britain and the whole of Ireland. You know, and the purpose of the agreement was to both devolve but also smudge national sovereignty. To this effect, Northern Ireland has an elected assembly, and both the British and Irish governments have a role in Northern Irish affairs via joint committees and so on. Brexit created a massive problem in that foundation upon which the Good Friday Agreement was predicated was just removed overnight. The Northern Ireland Protocol exists to stop the whole thing crashing down. It's like scaffolding. But because it's not exactly a simple, elegant solution, it doesn't really replace that foundation. because it's not possible to find a solution for such a messy, chaotic situation. So there's bound to be the odd hole that appears here or there in time, or at least there may be. And the purpose of Article 16 is to allow either the UK or the EU, as necessary, to put in place some emergency measure to deal with an unexpected event that's going to have dire consequences. It is supposed to be a temporary adjustment to allow a better fix to be put in place and stop a lot of people suffering. What it is not is an article that allows the UK government to go, oh, you know, we've got a load of trade barriers here. It's really difficult to have freight pass between Britain and Northern Ireland. We're going to suspend the Northern Irish Protocol, you know, because this is an entirely expected consequence. And it's because the government were too feckless to implement systems before they enacted it. We could have remained in the customs union single market as an implementation period, even after agreeing the Brexit deal, to implement the systems. We chose not to. The EU were against it. We chose not to. And also because the government have deliberately kept the public and businesses in the dark about what arrangements would be required, telling them just months ago that there'd be no arrangements required. And I'll link to a blog on the subject from the London School of Economics if you want some fuller details. What I want to do is to ask why are some of these Brexiteers being so dumb? Because here's the thing. The Brexiteers who think that this is the answer to the trade friction need to consider a couple of things. They actually need to consider a whole host of things, but I'm going to confine myself to a couple of things. One, are they seriously suggesting that the EU allowed an agreement to emerge that allows the UK government to just unilaterally renege on all of its obligations? You know, because that's what they seem to be thinking. Boris Johnson, he was cunning, you see. He had this article put in so that he could completely avoid the consequences, and the silly EU didn't realise that the EU are very well practised in international agreements. The UK government is not. No, they realised. One of the difficulties of the Brexit negotiations towards the end was the fact that the EU insisted on a clear mechanism for taking corrective action against any lowering of standards by the UK. If we do anything that's not in line with the political declaration effectively, we're going to be punished. The mechanism is in place to do so fairly quickly. The EU got what they wanted. The second thing to consider is that these same Brexiteers who believe Johnson now, Johnson said, oh yeah, I won't hesitate to invoke Article 16. They go, oh, good. These are the same ones who believed him when he said he'd rather be dead in a ditch than to facilitate Parliament's request for a Brexit extension towards the end of 2019. Then he did it anyway. The same Boris Johnson who said that there would be no paperwork or checks for trade between Britain and Northern Ireland, when there evidently now is, and the same Boris Johnson who said he'd be willing to breach the withdrawal agreement in a limited and specific way, of course, and then folded on that completely. Now here's the thing. I get that people can look at Boris Johnson and see, well, this guy has no respect for truth or the law, so if he says he's going to break a treaty or something like that, well, I can believe that because he's fundamentally dishonest. But there are clearly laws that he's willing to break, and there are clearly laws that he is not. And it all comes down to consequences if you actually look at the pattern. For example, he's almost certainly breaking the law with his dodgy COVID contracts to mates and donors and other contacts. This year, there's going to be hearings in court, and those courts are likely to rule to this effect. I'm not going to, prejudge, of course. We'll wait for that verdict. Now, if this happens, the consequence to Boris Johnson is zero. Not for the first time, a British court will rule that the Prime Minister broke the law. Nothing will happen. He won't have to resign. He won't be jailed. He won't even be fined. He will just be able to say, or we will just be able to say rather that he broke the law and is corrupt. And he will just say, corrupt judges. That's why we're getting rid of judges. We're going to appoint all our own judges. But if Boris Johnson had refused to comply, for example, with the Benn Act, which required him to send a request for a Brexit extension to the EU in October 2019, he could have been arrested and imprisoned for contempt of court. Makes no difference that he's Prime Minister. There's none of this Robert Mueller, we can't arrest a sitting president. No, a sitting Prime Minister can absolutely be arrested. Similarly, there are consequences for breaking international treaties. Despite his rhetoric, making it sound, full of bravado, making it sound like he'd be prepared to do it, and of course, that rhetoric has already caused a lot of damage to our reputation already. It's evident that he's not actually mad enough to go ahead with it, because he didn't. He wouldn't breach the Northern Ireland Protocol last year, so why would we think he would suddenly do it this year? All this talk of Article 16 is just so much hot air. Do you know what it's like? It's like GATT 24, or the technological solutions to the border problems, that Jacob Rees-Mogg was alluding to in 2019. Whenever anyone tried to say, but Ireland, what are you going to do about Ireland? First of all, GATT 24 allows us, to trade freely even without a deal with the EU for like 10 years. Oh, and, we're going to have these technological solutions, so there'll be no physical checks at all needed. All right, okay. So if GATT 24 helps us carry on free trade with the EU, how come we're not using it then? If there were technological solutions that prevent physical checks at customs borders, how come we don't have those up either? Come on, Moggy, where are they? How come they're not there? Also, how come no one's asking the Mogster this at the moment either? Why is no one coming back to him and saying, what about these things you said would clear up the whole mess in 2019 then? Were you lying then? And this is what some of these Brexiteers need to face up to. There's nothing in this Article 16 to deal with an inevitable consequence of exiting the EU's customs union. Boris Johnson is not going to breach the treaty in a way that would have severe international repercussions. There are going to be checks on some goods passing between Britain and Northern Ireland. That's all there is to it. There's going to be paperwork to be filled in, quite a lot of it. There's going to be extra costs for trading inside the UK. That is going to mean that some businesses, as they already have, are going to say it's not worth it to carry out that trade anymore. Some of the delays, some of the problems we're experiencing now will improve as systems are developed. But that friction is always going to be there. The paperwork's still going to be needed. The checks are still going to be needed. The costs are still going to be there. Brexit has shrunk the UK, and it may shrink it further before too long. And I cannot understand how it is possible to continue to be thick enough to believe that there are somehow international provisions capable of allowing us to jettison our obligations. International provisions are designed in actual fact to hold countries to their international obligations, not to provide an escape or a trapdoor, And how can they believe that we have a Prime Minister that is willing to break such a treaty when he has shown multiple times that when there's going to be severe consequences, for all his talk, he's quick with the chat, with the rhetoric, but for all that talk, he will always back down from doing so. But those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, please also click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.